All right, so you're thinking about adding SAP to your portfolio. And that's what we're diving into today. We'll be covering their financials and their recent moves, their market position, and even touch on some of the controversies surrounding the company.
Yeah, we've got a really great set of sources to pull from. We've got their Wikipedia page, some analyst forecasts from Zacks and Tip Ranks, and then a little bit of independent stock analysis. But I think we'll give you a really solid overview here, enough for you to be able to walk away and make a confident decision.
So first things first, who is SAP? They were founded way back in 1972 by a group of former IBM engineers
Uh-huh.
who had this vision for these enterprise-wide systems. Pretty classic tech origin story, right?
Absolutely. And from those early days working with mainframe software, they've just become the absolute leader in enterprise resource planning, or ERP.
Okay, so for those of us who don't live and breathe business software, what exactly does that mean? What is ERP all about?
So think of ERP as like the central nervous system of a huge company. It's all about streamlining operations, so managing finances, supply chains, human resources, you name it. And SAP is the biggest player in that space. I mean, they have a market share that just dwarfs the competition.
Oh, the world's largest ERP vendor. That is impressive. And their financials seem to back that up. We're talking over 31 billion euros in revenue. That's not a typo, folks. They're consistently profitable and growing.
Yeah, those are definitely some eye-catching numbers, and I mean, their financial performance is solid. But it is interesting that Zacks, which is a well-respected research firm, actually gives SAP a hold rating, not a buy. So there's a little bit of a puzzle here. We have this financial giant, strong performance, but not like a clear-cut buy recommendation.
That's definitely something to unpack. I'm curious what's behind that hold rating from Zacks.
Well, one of the things that they highlight is this potential overvaluation. So essentially, some of the metrics are suggesting that SAP's stock price might be a little bit higher than what their current performance would justify. So even though they're doing well, investors might be paying a bit of a premium.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about Tip Ranks analysts? Do they share that same concern about potential overvaluation?
You know, TipRank's analysts seem to be a bit more optimistic. They've got a pretty bullish 12-month price target. But it is important to remember that, analyst predictions, they're not crystal balls, right? They can definitely be wrong.
Yeah, very fair point. Now let's talk about what SAP is doing to stay ahead of the curve. Are they just sitting on their ERP throne, or are they making moves to really innovate and grow?
Oh, they're definitely not standing still. SAP has been pretty busy acquiring other companies, particularly in the cloud computing space. They snapped up Concur, which is a big player in travel and expense management software, and they formed a joint venture called SAP Fineer, which is focused on financial services.
So they're branching out beyond just that core ERP business and really trying to grab a piece of that cloud computing pie. But are these acquisitions a sign of strength? Or is this a sign that they're maybe playing a little bit of catch-up?
It's a great question, and it's definitely something that we'll kind of delve into a little bit further. But before we do that, it's important to remember that SAP isn't just about selling software. They have this massive global services business as well.
Right. Their support network is huge. They offer consulting, implementation, training. I mean, the whole 9 yards. It's not just a one-time software sale. It's this ongoing relationship.
Exactly, and that translates into recurring revenue, which can be very attractive to investors. It provides a level of stability and predictability, even in those kind of uncertain economic times.
Yeah, and you know what else is fascinating about this? Is the sheer reach of SAP's influence. So their software touches businesses all across the globe, helping manage supply chains and financials and even HR processes for, just a massive chunk of the world economy.
Yeah.
Talk about impact. Yeah, that's incredible. So it sounds like SAP is a company with a lot of strengths. They're the market leader. They've got a really strong financial track record, that huge services business we were talking about. And they're making strategic acquisitions to kind of expand their reach.
Right. They definitely have a lot going for them. But as with any investment, it's crucial to consider those potential downsides as well. And we've already touched on that concern about potential overvaluation. But those acquisitions that we talked about, while they can be a good thing, they also come with risks. Integrating a new company into a larger organization can be really messy, and not all acquisitions pan out the way that companies hope.
Right. History is littered with examples of mergers and acquisitions. That looked great on paper, but ended up being totally disastrous. So how can we kind of assess whether SAP's acquisitions are likely to be successful?
Well, one key factor is strategic fit. So does that acquired company really complement SAP's existing strengths and fill a gap in their offerings? So in the case of Concur, for instance, it seems to fit pretty well with SAP's goal of kind of expanding into that cloud-based travel and expense management market.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about acquiring any company, it's about acquiring the right companies that really align with their overall strategy.
Yeah.
What about innovation? Is SAP doing enough to stay ahead of the curve in what is a rapidly changing tech landscape?
No, yeah, that is a vital question. And they are investing heavily in cloud computing with their SAP S/4HANA and the SAP Business Technology Platform. But the question is, are they moving fast enough to compete with these born-in-the-cloud companies, these so-called cloud-native competitors?
Cloud-native competitors. Can you break that down a little bit? What makes them different?
Sure. So these are companies that were essentially built from the ground up in this cloud era, right? So their entire architecture and mindset is really geared toward these cloud-based solutions. And they're often much more agile and quicker to innovate than these kind of traditional software giants like SAP who are transitioning to the cloud.
Okay, that's helpful. So it sounds like SAP is facing some pretty stiff competition
Yeah.
in that cloud space. Are there any other challenges or risks that we should be aware of?
Well, one area that we definitely need to address is the kind of ethical dimension of their operations, those ESG factors that we mentioned earlier. So SAP has a long history of these philanthropic efforts, but they've also been embroiled in some controversies. They've faced significant fines for violating U.S. sanctions against Iran, and there have been allegations of bullying and misogyny within the company.
Yeah, those are some pretty serious accusations. It sounds like there's some definite ethical red flags to consider. So how should we kind of weigh those factors when we're evaluating SAP as an investment?
Well, it really comes down to personal values and risk tolerance, right? I mean, for some investors, these ethical concerns might be a complete deal breaker. Others might be willing to overlook them if they believe the financial prospects kind of outweigh the risks. It's a complex judgment call.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about what I know investors always want to know about. Dividends and share buybacks. What is SAP's track record on those?
So they do have a history of paying dividends, which can be appealing to those investors who are looking for that steady stream of income. But it is really crucial to examine their share buyback program carefully. Are they using it strategically to really enhance shareholder value, or are they maybe just trying to manipulate the stock price?
How can we kind of tell the difference? What should we be looking for?
Well, if a company is consistently buying back shares at inflated prices, that could be a sign that they're more focused on short-term gains than on kind of that long-term value creation. It's also important to consider whether they have better uses for that capital, such as, investing in research and development,
Yeah.
or making those strategic acquisitions.
Yeah, those are all really important points to consider. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at SAP's financials, their market share, their innovation efforts, their services business, the risks associated with acquisitions, those ethical considerations, and their dividend and buyback policies. It's been quite a journey.
It has. And hopefully you now have a deeper understanding of kind of what makes SAP tick, both the good and the bad. So what stands out to you from all of this? What are your key takeaways so far?
Well, for me, it's clear that SAP is a very complex company with a lot of moving parts. They are the dominant player in that ERP market, but they're facing those challenges from the cloud-native competitors. They're making those acquisitions to try and stay ahead of the curve, but those acquisitions come with risks. And then they've got, some ethical baggage that I think investors need to weigh really carefully.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. There's a lot to think about when it comes to SAP. It's not a simple buy or sell decision. It really requires careful consideration of their strengths, their weaknesses, and their potential for future growth.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've laid out the facts and kind of offered some insights. But ultimately, the decision of whether or not to invest in SAP is up to you, our listener. You've got to weigh the pros and cons and decide if it aligns with your investment goals and values.
And remember, investing is a marathon, not a sprint. Do your own research, stay informed, and make those decisions that are right for you.
That's great advice. And speaking of learning, we're always eager to hear from you, our listeners. Head over to our YouTube channel and let us know what you thought of this deep dive into SAP. What stood out to you? What questions do you still have?
And while you're there, tell us what other stocks or topics you'd like us to explore in future deep dives. We're always on the lookout for intriguing investment ideas, and we love getting suggestions from our audience.
Okay, so after all that, is SAP a good fit for your portfolio? It's decision time.
It is tricky, isn't it? I mean, they have that market dominance and the solid financials, and, they're actively trying to stay relevant with all these cloud investments and these acquisitions.
But we can't forget about that potential overvaluation. I mean, some metrics suggest their stock price might be a little inflated right now. And those ethical issues,
Hmm.
the sanctions violations, the workplace culture allegations, those are definitely things I think investors need to really consider.
Oh, absolutely.
Uh,
And for some investors, those controversies might be a deal breaker, right? But others might focus more on just the financials and that growth potential. It really does boil down to your own investment philosophy and your own risk tolerance.
it's interesting to think about the overall economic impact of a company like SAP. I mean, their software is used by so many businesses worldwide. If SAP sneezes, does the global economy catch a cold?
That's not too far off. I mean, their systems are really woven into the fabric of global commerce. They touch everything from manufacturing and logistics to finance and human resources. Their reach is massive.
Yeah, it makes you realize how interconnected everything is. A company that started with just 5 engineers in Germany now plays this really crucial role in how the entire world does business. It's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. And that's what makes analyzing a company like SAP so fascinating, right? There are so many layers to consider. You've got the financials, the technology, the market dynamics, the ethical dimensions, and even the broader economic context.
So what's the final verdict? Is SAP a buy, a sell, or a hold?
Well, we've given you the key information, and I think some thought-provoking questions to consider, but the final decision really does rest with you, our listener. Only you can weigh the pros and cons and decide if SAP truly aligns with your own investment goals and your own values.
Yeah, and we've done our best to equip you with the knowledge you need to make that informed decision. So now it's time to do your own due diligence, dig a little deeper, and really see if SAP has a place in your investment strategy.
And remember, the world of investing is constantly evolving, so stay curious, stay informed, and never stop learning.
Great advice. And speaking of learning, we're always eager to hear from you, our listeners. Head over to our YouTube channel and let us know what you thought of this deep dive into SAP. What stood out to you? What questions do you still have?
Yeah, and while you're there, tell us what other stocks or topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes. We're always on the lookout for these intriguing investment ideas, and we love getting suggestions from our audience.
So until next time, happy investing.